All right, let's start with the impossible and work up. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
And today we cover the Ultimates Issue 1 here on Speechless. Hello and welcome back to Speechless, our occasional podcast within a podcast where I get really excited about comic books and babble about them for about 6 episodes before we go back to talking about other stuff that's also comic book related because we just did X-Men 97.
I think Speechless has now become a once a year thing, is how it feels. For a while there, you did a good stint of Archer-based comics by yourself.
Right. But yeah, we did this about this time last year, actually. So yeah, it's become kind of a bit of an annual event. But I've been enjoying it because it's a nice way to kind of shake up the format, which we talked about before. We enjoy doing, and also it's a chance to kind of dig a little deeper into a different structure because everything else we talk about is all video in some way. So being able to talk about things different ways, it's kind of a nice change of pace.
I think some people would be very upset that you just called Big Finish a video, but I will not give those big people much more space in that one jab at you. So what I didn't tell Eddie, even during our pre-talk, is that for this episode, we have a special guest that he does not know about in the room with me right now.
Who's in the room?
It's my dog. Sleeping on her bed in the corner in my dark office because I woke up at the wee hours of the morning today, solo parenting. And she was like, well, your wife's not here. Why am I going to stay here by myself? And he came downstairs with me.
That is fair. My dog is asleep on the couch, so I'm also home by myself. So we are both solo parenting our dogs.
I think I've got you beat by one. Do you have a cap that you literally says "Dog Dad" on it that you wear in public willingly?
No, I don't.
I do.
Yeah, you win. That is
because I'm a man of a certain age. But we're not here to talk about my dog or my hats, although we could.
Right. We're here to talk about the Ultimates, and because it is super confusing, it was the first time when Chris pitched this to me. We're talking about the Ultimates, Volume 1, 2015. We are not talking about the Ultimates, which was the Marvel Comics Ultimate Universe version of the Avengers. We're not talking about the Ultimates 2, which was the spin-off sequel to the comic we're going to read right now. This is specifically the Ultimates, which came out of the Secret Wars events of 2015, when Marvel rebranded as All New, All Different Marvel, and they combined the Ultimate Universe and the Marvel Universe. And even more confusingly, the Ultimates comic has nothing to do with the previous team or even the Ultimate Universe.
Do you know what the Secret Wars was?
I do. That could be a whole other podcast, but super briefly. The first Secret Wars was 12 issues of a toy commercial because Marvel had a licensing deal to make action figures and they had to promote it. And so they literally had 12 issues of putting all the toys in a toy box and beating each other up. But the Secret War.
Don't leave out two very key crucial things that happened during Secret Wars, the first one.
Oh, God. Please tell me.
I can say 6, but I'm going to limit it to 2. Spider-Man gets his black suit. That is super cool.
Which does not cause any problems for him whatsoever in future.
And because if you're in an alien world and something plops out and it covers your entire body, instantly it's going to be your superhero suit because, no shenanigans. And number 2, Ben Grimm stays on Battleworld and She-Hulk joins the Fantastic Four as a member. Look at those 2 key events that change the course of the Marvel Universe.
I thought you were talking about how Colossus cheated on Kitty and then kind of didn't really feel bad about it.
Well, no, that relationship was always weird. Like, that is... He's too old for her. It's a whole thing. Well,
but
or how they dropped Magneto, I think, with the superheroes at that point in time in like 85.
Right, and that was kind of a tease for the stuff that's now being covered in the X-Men 97 show. But no, the other Secret Wars came about 30 years later. It was a 7-issue event, I want to say. Maybe it was 9. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Wait though. You
Mhm.
I'm giving you stick now because I have not done any research. This is just me having read as a kid. If I remember right, there was a Secret Wars 2 before that, or the Beyonder came to Earth with his Jerry curl in his white
Technically,
suit and walked around causing crap to happen and teamed up with Spider-Man and their buddies.
so yes, but that was
And
more of a ongoing storyline inside of the other issues, so it was more kind of a large crossover event than a separate, distinct thing. That was
but I think
also the
they called
one
it
where
Secret Wars 2
Spider-Man
though.
teaches the Beyonder how to poop, so yes, that is value.
Well, and it bumps into one of our favorite other superhero teams, Excalibur, and Rachel Summers almost destroys a Beyonder.
I mean,
Maybe.
if you want to get pedantic, there was also Secret Wars 3, which is exactly one issue in the Fantastic Four. But I'm not being pedantic. I'm trying to get to the actual ready to talk about, Chris.
But
So
did you forget what my superpower is?
making these episodes 3 hours long.
And seeing Eddie's face just like drops every time. It's like he could say something. Chris could say something really on point. Nope, not yet. Is he going to help me? Nope, not yet.
Why am I here? Why am I even
But
doing
Eddie
this?
keeps forgetting the rule of 3. It's always funny the third time.
I want to note that this is a
That
comic that Chris wanted to read. Chris said, "Hey, Eddie, we should read this comic," and he is doing his damnedest to avoid talking about the thing he asked me to read for him.
Did you like how I brought back the rule of 3 joke, though? It's been a while since I made that one. I had to bring it back.
Well, good. So now I can put it back in the box and leave it there forever until it dies of suffocation.
All right, but you were saying the real Secret Wars.
It's the Secret Wars 4, I guess. Was just 15 events, and basically was mandated that Marvel had to do a couple things. One of which was wrap up the Ultimate comic book line, which now officially has lasted exactly 9 years because they're starting the Ultimate comic line again. Whatever.
Do you want to give actually a 30-second overview what the Ultimate Universe was? Because we
I'll
are
get to that in a
steeped in
second.
lore and knowledge. Okay.
I was dead in a second. The other thing that they were required to do was the rights to the Fantastic Four were with Sony, and so needed to kind of stop publishing the Fantastic Four for a bit. So it was also a way to write out the Fantastic Four. So it was basically Doctor Doom tried to smash some universes together, and it became a big spin-off thing, like a lot of tie-in universe stuff, like the original X-Men animated series cartoon, and Marvel 2099, and kind of short miniseries that all kind of tied into this thing. But the main one was to collapse the Marvel continuity, commonly known as 616, which is the one that's been going on since the 60s. And the Ultimate Universe, which was a kind of reboot that started with Ultimate Spider-Man back in the late 90s. The idea of it being a new jumping on point for people who aren't familiar with this large continuity of comics, which then became a convoluted large continuity of comics that was equally hard to penetrate, and also made some really horrible decisions, both aesthetically and ethically. And so they said, we're
And a lot of
gonna just,
character assassination.
yeah, it had some good points, but we're not here to talk about the Ultimates. We're not here to praise him, simply to bury it. And
One thing I would like to add in though, before the Secret Wars themselves happened, one of the key points was the Illuminati, which was Iron Man, Professor X, the assholes we talked about when we were
right,
discussing Secret Invasion are a key factor in that. But if you've seen the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, they mention incursions. Incursions is actually the impetus that had all the different Marvel universes crashing into each other. The Illuminati were kind of stopping the incursions from hitting the 616.
right,
There you
right.
go. Little extra.
And that actually is relevant to, I think, at least the first 2 issues. I don't know if it's beyond that, because one of the things we're doing differently this time around is I am not reading ahead. I actually am reading this as we right before, well, not before we record, but like I'm not reading ahead, so I only know what's in front of me. But the main thing was they wanted to take some things from the Ultimate Universe they wanted to preserve. Miles Morales being the big and biggest and probably the best of that stuff they've saved, to make one synthesized universe. The reason why I went through all of this is 2 things. One is that hilariously, the Ultimate's name has nothing to do with any of that. According to an interview with Al Ewing, Basically, they're the ultimate super team solving ultimate problems. So the Ultimates is a fine name for a book. I didn't see the need to retire it just because the universe it came from is no longer with us. So
Not wrong.
explicitly, the writer chose that for that reason.
It's a great title. Like The
Right.
Ultimates is a great comic title that jumps out at you on the shelves.
Right. But the other one is that the premise for this is to protect Earth and the universe from cosmic threats. And some of that, if I am understanding nuance correctly, is a little bit of fallout from the Civil War, or sorry, from the Secret War
Civil
continuity,
War.
which leads into Civil War II. So for continuity purposes, we are right after the Secret Wars events, and we are right before Civil War II. I'm not going to go into Civil War II. It was terrible. It did character assassination on Captain Marvel. Not a fan of it.
Yep, absolutely agree. A few other tidbits though for Secret Wars is that T'Challa did some amazing stuff in it. The point I want to bring up, since you mentioned Miles Morales, is that Miles in the Ultimate Universe replaced Peter Parker, because in the Ultimate Universe, Peter Parker gets killed, question mark, and has to struggle to become Spider-Man. There's a whole thing, and became a great character in his own right. During the Secret Wars, they wanted to bring Miles over, so Miles became friendly with the Molecule Man and gave him a cheeseburger that had been in Miles's costume for who knows how long, because the Molecule Man was hungry, and the Molecule Man remembered that. It kind of brought Miles over and restored Miles's family. So
Right.
look at that. And Secret Wars, in the end, also dealt with Molecule Man and Doctor Doom battling a whole slew of Beyonders.
Right.
It's a
Right.
pretty solid read. And then
It's
seeing
honestly not a bad event. Honestly.
God King Doom sort of rule everything, and seeing who
Yeah.
kind of remembers what happened before and who tries to solve it. And anything that has the Thor core is just funny.
Yes. Again, like, for a corporate mandated event, it's actually quite a good one, and it's one of the rare events where all the spin-off stuff is unnecessary but kind of fun in its own right. I remember specifically it was called X-Men '93, I believe, which was the animated series spin-off. That had some fun things in it. They did a Deadpool revisiting the original Secret Wars and how he was secretly involved in the original Secret Wars events the entire time. Um, anyway, battleground stuff is fun. But
And
so this,
this
go ahead.
picks up maybe 6 to 8 months afterwards. And the thing was, they were supposed to be able to take the 616 in the Ultimate Universe in a blender and pour them all out and have something totally new and something totally different to engage people with, like taking the best parts of both universes and running with it.
Right.
I will say up front, they didn't do that.
Yeah. No. The Ultimate Universe largely just went away, and the new Ultimate Universe is completely different from the previous Ultimate Universe. So again, there you go. So yeah, this actually gets kicked off in Avengers Volume 6, Issue 0, which is published in October 2015. I am reading the trades paperback called The Ultimate Start with the Impossible. And it does have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages from Zero that talks about this. They are generally skippable because everything gets referenced in here more or less gets covered in issue 1 again. But it is a lot of great America Chavez literally punching holes in reality. So I don't necessarily. It's fun to watch. She also literally dances to save the universe because that tells you what kind of comic this is going to be.
Since this is our first one, so I have the digital copy and I have the print version. My print version is now upstairs. And you mentioned those 8 pages. Did you know the digital copy on my iPad does not have those 8 pages from the
I'm not
Marvel
surprised.
Unlimited app?
I'm not
You would
surprised.
hope
It probably
more
goes
from
right into the
Marvel.
issue. Yeah.
It does. But before we dive into it, I would like to add a little something different for how we're going to do the speechless. This is more of Eddie's ship. I'm just sort of the sidekick on the ship,
Being dragged
almost like
along.
the parrot, and I occasionally go, "Bark!" But maybe we do like a brief bit about each character at the start of each issue, because we're going to do roughly 5 issues of it. And
So there are 5 members of the Ultimates. So which one do you want to talk about first, and why is it Blue Marvel?
I know that you're shocked, Eddie, that it's going to be Blue Marvel
I had no idea.
because I love Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is like one of my favorite Marvel characters, and took forever to have the character made. Because for a long, if anyone has listened to me or read any of my stuff online, I rant about superheroes, and frequently most black superheroes either have a lightning based power
Mhm.
or they have no superpowers in their street level primarily, like usually across the
Right.
board. And you could say, but what about Storm? I will say Storm shoots lightning from the sky that technically is electricity and still counts as like my electrical based power. She has some other stuff, but super cool. But then you get people like Falcon, Night Thrasher. I could list a slew of other characters like that. Misty Knight, that are all basically street level characters. Blue Marvel is what I wanted. I wanted a genius level character with near superpowers, like a Superman equivalent. And they did that with Blue Marvel,
Yep.
which, while I've wanted it for so long, part of the problem that Marvel had, though, is they didn't know how to write for that character. So that's why Blue Marvel is constantly sort of shunted onto teams and doesn't really do a lot, where Blue Marvel should have his own solo titles.
What little I've read of Blue Marvel so far, I completely agree with you. He seems like a really cool character.
To get
And luckily, issue 1 does a really good job of introducing Blue Marvel as a character to new readers, which is helpful for me.
to give just a quick snippet on some of the background history, Blue Marvel is a character that was a scientist, like a football star in college, and in the 60s is when they did most of their superheroics. And they wore like a full blown mask and everything else. They saved a bunch of people. During
Mm.
one of the massive battles, his mask got cracked and everyone saw that he was a black man and they were shocked. And that's when I think it's President Kennedy asked him to stop being a superhero for America. And so you get the moral quandary of a character that goes, I have all these powers, but now I'm being told by my country that they don't want me to do that. So
Mhm.
he retires from superheroics in the 60s after already having a somewhat successful career and kind of vanishes. Unbeknownst to the character, Shield had planted a woman who eventually he marries and becomes his wife, and they have a kids. And so she's a secret spy for Shield for 40 years, married to him,
Yep.
before I want to say it's the Anti-Man comes back. The Anti-Man's a incredible powerhouse of like just antimatter energy. He's like taking on the Sentry. For anyone that doesn't know the Sentry is another Marvel superhero, Superman equivalent. And the Antimatter Man keeps mentioning someone called Blue Marvel not being able to stop him. That sparks Marvel's greatest villain, Tony Stark, to go and find out who Blue Marvel is, and they bring Blue Marvel in, and Blue Marvel helps Avengers stop the Antimatter Man. Then Blue Marvel joins some different Marvel teams. Primarily, all of Superman powers Blue Marvel has, plus the brilliance of Reed Richards. The quick version.
Absolutely. This is very quick. And as a note, this is a rare superhero team which has no Caucasian men on it whatsoever. And we'll talk about that more as we go through, but that was damn refreshing. But anyway, issue 1 was written by Al Ewing, artist by Kenneth Rutherford, color artist was Dan Brown, and letterer was VC's Joe Sabino. And in my version, they have the variant cover with Scotty Young, which shows a very adorable Galactus licking the Earth like a lollipop. I love Scotty Young. Anyway, so issue 1, we start off in deep space aboard a 2-person Wakandan exploration craft known as the Shaho. And the very first line is where I get my quote from. Is let's start with the impossible and work up, and that is how we're introduced to Dr. Adam Brashear. Is that how you pronounce his name? Well, I'm
You really
asking you if
asking
you
me
want
for
to know.
pronunciation?
Yeah, I realized it. So I said, I was like, why'd I ask you that? But his code name is Blue Marvel. He's listed as the living antimatter reactor and super genius. And he's explaining a holographic representation of matter and antimatter existing in total harmony in something called neutronium. And it's believed to be some kind of a birth call for the universe, the kind of thing that gets created when the universe is built. He's been trying to harvest it for years. He always refused to cohere into a normal shape. And there's some psychobabble around that involving 7 versus 8 numerological things. But then just recently, apparently, neutronium now completely exists in real space. And then we have this beautiful splash page of these little cubes of neutronium shooting out from a star with different galaxies inside of them. And this is the creation of Isometry 8 or ISO 8, which will go on to be in the MacGuffin for a ton of Marvel comics and weirdly a ton of Marvel video games from around this time. Because I literally, until I read this comic, had no clue what the hell ISO 8 was for years. And thought, like, oh, that's what it's supposed to be.
Since we're just literally getting started with it now, how do you like the art style?
I really do like Roquefort's art. So it's very, like a term, house style, in the sense that if you pick this up and weren't paying too close attention, it'll look like many other Marvel comics on the stand. So I mean that's nice, but he does add a level of detail to faces and bodies that I really appreciate. There's some really nice line work around Blue Marvel's face, for example, in these first few pages that I really think adds a lot of depth and texture to them. And also the colorist I'm going to talk a lot about the color, but the colorist does a fantastic job because these first couple pages, there's lots of blues and purples because it's supposed to be cosmic stuff, but it doesn't look muddy or boring because there's little pops of yellow and green and pink and orange throughout all of this that really help to accentuate the darker hues of the cosmic setting, which are really, really great.
Hands down agree. And even if I hadn't liked Blue Marvel, I remember seeing the comic cover in the shop because I was still going to comic shops then, and it jumped out at me. And being able to like just flip through it there in the store made me want to buy it even more.
Yeah.
Curiously though, what is your opinion of house style? Because you mentioned the Marvel house style. I think we touched on it too when we talked about Cap and Iron Man.
Right.
Do you think that is a great move for companies in general to have a very solid, coherent style, or would it be cooler to have more of a variant style that goes throughout all of your different comics all the time?
That's an interesting question because for a long time, I was generally a fan of house style, right? Like the idea of I want my comics to they're in a cohesive universe. I want them to kind of look at least somewhat like each other. There's a visual connectivity that comes with that I appreciate. But in recent years, I've kind of changed my mind on that. One is I was rereading the original New Mutants and it just fell in love again with Bill Sienkiewicz's artwork on that, which is not at all Marvel House style. It's completely different. But those comics would be fundamentally worse if they did not have that incredibly energetic style that Bill Sienkiewicz brought to it. And I feel like the New Mutants would not have had its own identity as a comic if it didn't have that bold departure visually. Because the earlier comics were kind of X-Men but the same over again.
Was that Demon Bear?
Yes, that was Demon Bear Saga specifically is where
Yeah.
it really kind of takes off. But also just the introduction of Warlock, and Warlock just was fundamentally different under Bill Sienkiewicz's pen.
Warlock
He's
doesn't work
basically
well with house style at all. Sorry. I
no, he's a
remember
living
those now
scribble.
that you're saying it. I'm seeing like the scribbles and
Yeah,
everything. Oh,
right.
beautiful.
But the other thing is also I have been reading more anthology style comics like 2000 AD, where the point is that you're only getting 7 pages of an ongoing serial, and so having different art styles in one single issue adds a sense of energy and dynamism to showcase these are all different stories. But they're all different universes too, right? They're not, well, a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, they're not meant to be continuous. And so even long-running serials like Judge Dredd, each having a different art style, gives you a different perspective into the character and look to the character. I'm kind of receding back from an insistence on house style. It is interesting when certain artists, it goes back and forth, right? Because like in the 90s, it's a long digression, but in the 90s, the art in Marvel radically changed because a couple of people like Jim Lee really refused to work in art style, and everyone gravitated to that. But then that became a new house style for the 90s. Was kind of that uh, 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 look, very kind of very muscular pouches look. We mock now, but that's what dominated the look. And then
I
in the
mocked
early
then too.
2000s, Huh?
I mocked then too.
Oh yeah, sure. In the 2000s, it changed again, especially with digital coloring, and that's kind of been persistent more or less now. But then we have people like Peach Makamo, who have recently come onto Marvel, and they have a very distinctive style, and that becoming very popular. Scotty Young, as I just mentioned earlier, Scotty Young has a very explicitly cartoony style, and so Marvel's now once again back to different series can have slightly different looks, but generally, if they're in a part of a group, they have to look similar. So, leading back to this topic, this is considered to be an Avengers book. It's, in fact, the pull quote on the back of my trade is, "This is Marvel's premier Avengers comic." So this is spun out of the Avengers. This is part of the Avengers family of comics. So it may not look like a 2015 X-Men comic, but it will look like a 2015 Avengers comic. So house styles kind of started to break down to silos, if you will.
Okay, interesting. Because I think at this time they would have also had, was it the New Avengers, the Mighty Avengers had already gone away, and so they had a slew of different Avenger titles constantly cropping up.
Right, because yeah, Mighty Avengers, New Avengers, Avengers, Ultimates, and there's one other one that I'm blanking. It may have been AVX, or maybe it's after AVX. I don't remember.
Because unfortunately, the West Coast Avengers were already gone, but then I think
Yeah,
they came back later with Kate Bishop, Hawkeye leading them.
yeah, right. I think that West Avengers was around this time actually. I think maybe also Savage Avengers might have been around this time. I don't remember.
I think that one was a little later because that
was
had
one with Conan.
She-Hulk. No, you're right. No, maybe. All right. Now I got to go back and reread those.
Right.
Damn you, Webb.
The idea was that X-Men piloted the way of lots of comics having rough tie-ins, if you will. And so lots, and this is deep into the House of X run where there was separate but related X titles going on. So they're trying to do the same thing with the Avengers out of Secret Wars. Anyway, so
nothing's going to beat X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue. Please go ahead.
So we find out that Blue Marvel is talking to Colonel Carol Danvers, codenamed Captain Marvel, who's listed in the comic as super strong energy absorber and Earth's mightiest hero, pissing off Thor very far away. And he should be. But she explains that she's... Oh, go ahead.
All right. You said that. Now we have to. Captain Marvel is more powerful than Thor.
Agreed.
Like, is that a real discussion that people have?
Yes.
Why?
Well, some of it is because Thor has that discussion. It's part of a running gag is that Thor claims to be Earth's mightiest hero, to the point where Hercules at one point steps into one of those conversations and says, "No, actually I am," and then everyone kind of just laughs at Hercules. So
Thor can't beat the Hulk. Already, like, that goes out the window. I'm just... All right, no, I will not bring us down into that conversation about us getting toys and hitting them together.
You're not arguing with me. So she's piloting the ship, and she mentions that she's one Tarsec from the target zone. And so they're about to do something, but what's interesting is Blue Marvel says, "This is super science. This is my life. I was born ready." Which goes back to that Reed Richards super genius vibe you're talking about, is like he's out here because he loves science. He loves exploration, which is great.
And it's honestly nice to have someone with that level of power whose first go-to move is not to punch someone in the face.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, we joke about Thor right now, but Thor's first move is going to hit you with Mjolnir.
Right.
Like, hands down, smack, and see if that solves the problem. And it's nicer to have people that think through it.
Right. So they hilariously call themselves Team Marvel because it's Captain Marvel and Blue Marvel. And they're calling the Triskelion, which is a building in New York City. And we cut to King T'Challa of Wakanda explaining about Triskelion. He's listed, his royal title is Black Panther, which is correct. He's listed as having enhanced strength, senses, and reactions, leader of the most advanced society of the planet, which again, objectively correct.
Dr. Doom would be upset, but it is correct.
Yeah, Dr. Doom would be mad about it, but he's wrong.
Namor is mad to you.
And so he talks about how the Triskelion is 3 lines of defense. It originates from the Greek 3 lines running from central hub. So one is the ground crew for the Alpha Flight program.
Eddie.
Which I'll get to in a second. One wing is the Wakanda Embassy in New York, which is the Triskelion that we read earlier. And the one wing for this, whatever this is, which turns out to be the Ultimates, to solve the cosmic scope before it becomes an issue for Earth and the wider universe. So the Ultimates are part of a three-prong attack. Very quickly, Alpha Flight was the Canadian superhero team. It got disbanded at some point in time in the 90s because their sales were terrible, but also some in-world reason I've forgotten. And they were rebranded as kind of the team that fights interstellar conflicts, but on Earth. So they're the Interstar team that stays on Earth to investigate and fight them. That's my understanding of what Alpha Flight does. They're connected to Sword in some way. I'm not as familiar with this part of the continuity, I admit.
I guess I'm still thinking of the old school Alpha Flight, who primarily almost fought like supernatural threats.
Yeah, no, they now punch aliens and shit. So,
I kind of liked them better punching supernatural
I agree.
stuff. That's just me.
So it turns out that he is showing around some diplomats who are asking questions, and the UN is a little concerned about this, and particularly the worried about there's worried about potential of cooperation between Wakanda and the United States in terms of military. To which T'Challa, I fucking love T'Challa, just says, America would only slow us down. I love arrogant King T'Challa. He's my favorite.
This is a point where I still like T'Challa. There's some runs where they do almost character assassinations on T'Challa too. But this is peak Black Panther for me.
No, this is because this is the era of like, I'm going to expand Wakanda into space and have a space empire because god damn it, I'm the Black Panther.
And I almost suggested that Coates is run too, because I am a fan of Coates and like some of his journalism, like the books he writes and everything else, and that was up there. Also, he did a run on Captain America too that I almost suggested.
Yes. So T'Challa mentions that he has another appointment, and we get to a beautiful one-page spread, which is explained to the next page, but also, for those who are long-term fans, is the kind of Mobius strip ship that belongs to Galactus.
Oh, beautiful. Eddie.
Yes.
We're going to get more into Galactus, but who is Galactus in 30 seconds, and who was their primary antagonist of Galactus? And how did they used to stop Galactus?
So Galactus was created by Jack Kirby as part of the around issue 50 of Fantastic Four. So he was the main antagonist in Fantastic Four. He was known as the Devourer, which his name gets dropped here, because he eats planets for energy. And he was stopped because Reed found a universe-defying gun and pointed it in his face and said, "Get off my world." And Galactus says, "You're not stupid enough to use that." And he said, "Fuck you, I'm American." He doesn't say exactly those words, but that's basically what it comes down to. It's like, yes, I will destroy the entire world just to get someone off my lawn.
What was the gun called, if you remember?
The Ultimate Nullifier, which caused, and he had to get, because Johnny Storm had to fly through some bizarre Jack Kirby inspired panels for undefined reasons, because the Fantastic Four in those days, everyone had a role to play, but it made no sense. And the Fire guys was to fly through 5-dimensional space to get the Ultimate Nullifier.
So I want to take
I love it.
One more beat. That the Fantastic Four went from Dr. Doom outside the Baxter building, I believe, with a megaphone shouting at them, to stopping Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, with a gun within 50 issues. Just want to.
Oh yeah, no, it's
put that out there.
Yeah. Issue 3 was we're turning Skrulls into cows. Issue 50 is we're going to destroy literally the end of the universe with a gun. So.
Yeah, please proceed.
So T'Challa explains that Devourer is a problem they have chosen to solve. So the Ultimates were created to proactively solve problems like Galactus. How do you solve a problem like Galactus? Well, apparently with Black Panther. And so he, the UN representative is like worried about this may escalate, and he's like, no, Wakanda takes on all of the danger of this. This is something we're choosing to do. And so UN's like, cool, hope that works out for you. We're going to go into this bunker over here that away from where all you crazy people are doing stuff.
Are they
Uh,
going into a fallout shelter?
ah,
Ooh.
So he calls Monica Rambeau, codename Spectrum, living electromagnetic energy and expert strategist, and talking about her end of the mission. So I'll pause there because I know what Chris is going to ask next. Monica Rambeau, formerly Captain Marvel, formerly someone else before Spectrum. I forget who her middle codename was.
We're gonna do character spotlight, so that's why
Okay,
I'm not asking you, because
fair enough.
I
Fair enough.
purposely left it. I gave a real quick one of Blue Marvel today. I may give a longer one next time, and like a longer one of whoever the next character is.
Okay, fair enough. She had the Avengers once. I know that. But we cut to
She stopped Zeus by herself
she
once.
did. Moroder 9, which is a planet in the Arcano system. So again, we've cut from a 2-member team in the middle of outer space calling back to Earth. T'Challa's now calling back out to another completely different planet. And again, it's only a half-page panel, but we see Monica looking out over this kind of amazing-looking circular city ruins thing and a floating kind of island above it that is thinking the word obey. Which is actually interesting because you don't see thought bubbles much anymore. That was a surprise to me.
Agreed. But no, like the artwork is staggering for me. Like the
Yeah.
vastness of that image that it's showing, just the two of them, and you can see everything else in the distance. That is like a beautiful perspective about what they're about to do.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because this is the kind of thing that I think I would say maybe a lesser artist would try to do a 2-page spread to show the scale of. The fact that this person shows the same scale in half a page shows a real economy. Now, granted, this issue has to go through a lot, so I think it is a bit more compressed than you would find in a typical issue of this era. So I think it's some of it, but it still shows the artist was up to that challenge.
And hearing you say that now, I'm looking at how do you like how they're telling the story? I want to talk more about how the cutout boxes are, where they're sort of how they're placed and everything else, almost like a collage on top of each other, different points.
That's a good point. So all of the panels, with very rare exception, are not perfectly square. All of them have at least one of the edges at an angle. And that starts from the very beginning, which is nice because the idea is that was Blue Marvel saying how this elements couldn't quite cohere into a solid square shape. And so the rest of the issue carries that theme along visually. But what happens here is that each character gets basically 4 pages, or group of characters, I should say, gets about 4 pages of introduction. So literally the first 4 pages are Team Marvel talking, and then there's a call and there's a carryover to T'Challa. He gets 4 pages of discussion. He calls to Monica and America Chavez and brings them into the story. And they get a slightly longer introduction, but that's because we're now actually getting into the story proper. And so it does a very good job of showcasing these characters in a very quick fashion.
Now that you've said that, it does have me thinking that if I hadn't read those first 8 pages of equivalent issue 0, this story would hit me differently. Like right now, I don't have a lot of context for America Chavez. And
True,
if I remember right,
America gets hers in the 8-page preview from Avengers Zero. You're right.
And that Avengers Zero is where she kind of auditions for the team. And without seeing her last comment about, I'm here to stop you if I need to. Like was in those 8 pages, which is a critical piece of it as we're reading through it. Now, since I am using like the iPad version that doesn't have those, the story works differently.
That's weird. A good point. I don't know. I don't know what that's a reference to, so I'll find out. But so Monica and America, as I know, America Chavez, her code name is listed as Ms. America. She is listed, her powers listed as multiverse teleporter, flying brick plus, which I love, and transdimensional troubleshooter. Which is basically pretty much she punches holes in reality and goes to different realities and punches things. That she's not a subtle character. Because it was relevant in the earlier 8 pages, I will mention also that America Chavez is a lesbian, which is a fact that nobody in the team gives a fuck about. So, but there's a nice bit because Monica is kind of explaining what's going on, and Monica's really falling into a mentorship role very quickly to America, it seems. She's coming across as the kind of more experienced. I've seen some weird stuff in my life, and America's pointing out that she's been doing this since she was a kid. So there's an interesting balance of America has more experience doing this kind of specific thing, whereas Monica's experience is more well-rounded. And I think it's coming
Mhm.
across in just a few panels, which is fantastic. But like America points out, she understands physics, gravity, orbital mechanics. She knows she is an expert in multiversal travel, but Monica has a wider range of experiences. So there's a nice balance of Monica's kind of gravitating towards more of a leadership role in this two-person unit, whereas America's more of the expert. So no one's diminished.
Love it.
And I do
Like,
like that two of the women characters are the bruisers on the team.
this is just exceptional writing. And I don't, you know what? We're a podcast that talks about stuff that we really like. I love this. I love how the team is flowing. I love how the different dynamics are being shown for each team member. And the fact that, once again, even in this team of people that are utterly exceptional, Black Panther is still the odd one out. Because if
Right.
you look, everyone else is teamed up with someone else and they're working as a team together. Black Panther is a ruler that is telling other people what to do, but is saying that I like when my subjects question some of my decisions. So you have that dichotomy of each character. And he is not playing a part of a peer for them right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Ultimates right now are kind of two strike teams with one person in the middle who's providing support and logistics. So there's not a traditional one person who's a leader to everybody else thing. Instead, what's kind of happening is you have Team Marvel, where they're both in those 4 pages, kind of across as peers. Neither one's, basically Blue Marvel's more of the science side, Carol's more of the piloting and fighting side, but they're not. There's no debate about who's in charge. This team, Monica's gravitating a little more towards I know how to handle problems, and America's more of the kind of multidimensional support, if you will, multidimensional expert. So I'm curious to see how that evolves. But it turns out that the floating thing above the city is a giant floating head that is a panopticonic astral consciousness, basically a one being surveillance state.
I love it.
And there's this great page where he takes up 3/4 of the page where it's this floating purple head with 6 eyes, and opens his mouth, these little bug creatures with people riding them fly out of it as he just thinks, obey, obey, obey. It's exactly the right amount of interesting science fiction and cosmic weirdness that feels very Jack Kirby.
Do you know what I thought of as soon as I saw it?
What?
Oh my God, I forgot the name, but now that I said it. Zartos, that Sean Connery
Oh,
sci-fi movie that is weird as fuck.
yeah. Wow. And so Monica goes into it, and she starts to explain that because we kind of glossed over, so we'll talk about more about it when we get to her spotlight. But she's basically made of energy, and she references how she spent so many years thinking like she was human, and then she had her consciousness expanded, and so she's slipping into her light form. She even says it's like taking off a diving suit. So she's getting more comfortable in her light form, in her energy form, than she is in her human form, which is an interesting dynamic. And so she's seeing America like she's moving through water, like she's moving in slow motion. And she's impressed. She's like, oh my God, she's amazing. She's so powerful. And then it ends with, God, I feel old, which is a great beat, partially because again reestablishes that Monica's older, America's more experienced because of a way dynamic, but also she starts off saying, my conscience expanded beyond being human, and she ends on a very human thought, which reinforces that Monica's maybe lying to herself a little bit about how she feels about herself.
Oh,
And so we're halfway through this first issue, and already we have, well, 2/3 of the way through this issue, we already have some pretty nuanced characters. Really, T'Challa is the least nuanced because he's just basically the manifestation of pure badassery, which is fine. I love that for T'Challa. He gets more complicated before and apparently badly after this, but he doesn't need to be, right? He's just the king who's keeping it together. Everybody else has something interesting going on in their head already, which is great.
Well, that works well because they get to play off, once again, goes back to being peers and colleagues. They're playing off of each other and their banter together. There is no one for T'Challa to play off of like that,
Right.
where he is.
Right. Yes. And this comic also something, it's a common trick, especially when you notice it, but where the last beat of a previous page ties into the beat of the page flip. And so it ends with Monica saying again, God, I feel old. And it starts with Captain Marvel on the next page going to Blue Marvel. Seriously, you're in your 80s? Which is a great way for Blue Marvel to kind of explain his whole thing going on, and talks about how he's a bit conservative, which is fascinating, right? Because he's flat out saying, I'm not sure I like what my son's doing with that DaCosta fellow, which implies, I don't know the situation. I suspect they're probably in a gay relationship, but anyone being worried about hanging out with Roberto DaCosta probably has reasons to be concerned because it's Roberto DaCosta. So I love Roberto, but he's a problem.
Like, I don't remember that one either, but if the next bubble, though, talks about island bases, flashy jumpsuits, I think this is when Roberto buys AIM and he takes over, like, that. And so his son is helping him with AIM.
Okay.
Although I think it'd been cooler, it could be cool if they were in the relationship, because then you get that dichotomy of someone from nearly a century ago getting used to that idea, which is beautiful. But I think that would be more nuanced than what Marvel would be capable of telling.
Right. But the one thing that this comic can do is that it can have overlapping but not identical identity, right? And I'm already seeing that here is that Blue Marvel's experience as a black man is different from T'Challa's experience as a black man. It's different from Monica's experience as a black woman. And we're already seeing slightly different takes on that. In fact, is that he is in his 80s. He is going to be somewhat conservative by things. It's the Captain America story, but in some respects, Captain America also came back from a previous time. But it's not the same story because Blue Marvel has a very different take on this, primarily because he's a black man.
And not only that, though, Steve came back after being frozen in ice. Adam lived through that experience.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
And one of the scenes I love the best happens between Luke Cage and Adam. Because
really?
Luke, I want to say it might have been like a revamp Mighty Avengers or New Avengers when they're on a team for like a blink of an eye. And Luke comes up to him and talks about, where are you at during all of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And him explaining that the president asked me not to do that. And you have one of my favorite things from Blue Marvel is that he realizes that he made a mistake and says, I let others decide my fate. I'm no longer doing that. And that's sort of like his big moment. You have him like flying up in the air in that comic scene. That is a panel that will always be in my brain because it's like his equivalent of Superman's up, up, up and away. It's like choosing my own fate from now on.
Awesome. Yeah. And this leads to a conversation with him and Carol about how literally he says, I question myself. I question this. How far could we go? And specifically says you can't be another Illuminati, which goes back to your earlier point. Why it was important to mention the Illuminati is because they don't want the Ultras to become another group of, let's be blunt, white men trying to tell everybody how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it's interesting because they keep reframing it as problems. Carol's the second person to say this is a problem that needs solved. And so the vibe that's kind of coming off this is that this is not a team that's going to. It is going to be a proactive team because they're proactively engaging with Galactus, but they're choosing to solve discrete problems rather than overall trends. They're not trying to shape society. They're trying to say, this is a problem, we're going to go solve it, which I like.
Love it.
And they stumble across the Punishers, which they clarify immediately is not related to Frank Castle. And there's again another Fantastic Four deep cut because these are guys originally from, I want to say, the Negative Zone, but they're basically just blue guys with goggles on their heads that are very, very dense and very, very punchy and very hard to kill.
Eddie,
Yes,
30 seconds. What is a negative zone?
it's this zone, but negative. No, it's a different dimension where the laws of reality are different. Again, these are all Jack Kirby riffs. I mean, yes, they're technically Fantastic Four deep cuts, but they're also more explicitly that kind of Kirby cosmic deep cuts. So it's interesting to kind of see them play in that world space.
And the other bit when during one of the like superhero civil wars, Reed Richards and Hank Pym created a prison that where they put other superheroes in the negative zone, because if you break out of prison, you can't escape, because if you do, you're still stuck in the negative zone.
That's right. I forgot about that part. You're right. So they have a great line where it's like, can you breathe in space? If I have to, I think you have to, because the Punisher start ripping into the ship.
I love the comment that like, this was a great ship and there's a disappointment they lost the ship.
Yes. And so Carol's like, shoot me. Adam's like, what? Because she's an energy absorber. And so she's like, pump full of energy so I can go what she calls go binary, which is her enhanced form, which comes from her original code name of binary for a while.
That's an X-Men cut, by the way, for people.
Yes. And there's even, you mentioned that, but when she's powering up, there's a small panel of her kind of glowing. She's red in the face, but the round is blue. And she looks a bit like Phoenix, mentioning X-Men cuts. It looks a bit like Rachel, specifically the Rachel Phoenix. When she was powering up, she got that kind of reddish face look.
Do you not remember what binary looked like when she's fully powered?
Oh, no, you're right. She was red in the face, wasn't she, when she turned binary?
Yeah, like red, like white, and very not Captain Marvel. Different character.
Yes. But again, nice little touch. This is clearly a team that's done their homework, and they're doing deep cuts in a way that we're pulling them out because it's the kind of podcast we're doing, but you don't need to know the stuff to enjoy the story, right? It's just little kind of visual homages to things. One thing the story is doing is explaining these things.
Those deep cuts are built for us who are geeks that have spent their lives reading these comics.
Right, but if you don't know that, it's just like a nice bit of color and visual interest. So it flows really well. And there's a great moment where she explodes the Punishers. And so there's a panel of the explosion happening, but then the next panel is her in her binary form, and her fist is up into the previous panel. So it looks like she literally punched all of the Punishers and exploded them. There's an implied action there that tells the story a lot better than us actually having seen that. She literally goes binary. We see an explosion. Her fist is overlapping that explosion. We know she's responsible for that, and her fist is glowing and has such energy crackling off of it. So it's very efficiently telling a story, because frankly, them disposing of the Punishers is not the interesting part of the story. So they're very just it's a bit of extra agency before we get to the meat of this.
At their power level, that fight would have been super boring.
Right, and so they just skip right over it effectively, which is fantastic. It's the right call to make, because literally we have gone from the Punishers show up, tear into the ship, Carol gets shot, and then she explodes them in 3 pages. That's all. And for this era of comics, this kind of modern day comics, that would have been in a lesser comic, probably a good 5-6 pages. This is a tight comic. And it also makes room for what happens, because at the end of this, you hear the strange crackly bubbles, which is that Galactus kind of not speech, and there's a page flip. This is one of the things where the physical thing helps, because you lose some digital, but like there's actually a physical page turn to a page spread with some panels over it of Galactus. So we're talking before about how all the other things was doing the job of selling scale. He saves a 2-page spread for Galactus, and all the stuff that gave him scale is applied also to this. So Galactus looks even more gigantic. Like, you have to look very closely under the word bubble. Again, perfect word bubble placement. You see "End Galactus," and just under that bubble, you can see a tiny floating platform with both of the marbles on it. So that word bubble jaws your eye to see them, because otherwise it would be lost in this massive scope.
So well
But
done.
anyway, so Galactus is like, you're here to try to end my life. You're here to try to kill me. And Carol says, no, that's not why we're here. We're the ultimates. We're here to solve the ultimate problems, and we're here to solve yours. And his great beat of looking down on them on the flowing platform, looking badass, and we get to find the title of Marvel Comics Presents The Ultimates and start with the impossible.
And it is so beautiful because when it ends, you have Blue Marvel saying that they're there to solve Galactus's problem. So that's like reinforces their entire mission statement. It's coming from like the scientist, and we'll get more insight into Galactus shortly, which that has even more resonance in the upcoming issue. Because I read some stuff this morning right before we jumped on.
Right.
I
Because I have been reading Marvel Comics off and on, I know I think I know where this is going because I know there's a beat in the Fantastic Four comic that comes after this that references this. I didn't know at the time what that was a reference to. Now I do. So this is some filling gaps. But it was still a surprise to me reading it because everything in the issue was implying that Galactus' assumption was correct. Right? It's like they were getting this whole team together to kill Galactus because that's generally what you do when Galactus comes around. And because they're an Avengers team, that's generally what the Avengers try to do. But this show or this issue very carefully is like, we had that moment of Blue Marvel going, I don't want to do things the way we did before. And Carol's response was kind of, no, yeah, I think you did a good job with it. But it was not non-committal, but it didn't pin down that, no, we're intentionally doing things differently. We got that reveal at the end. And by reframing all of this as problem solvers, it's a superhero comic book, so you think, oh, we're going to punch everything. And again, to be fair, there was a lot of punching in this issue. We punched a bunch of Punishers, and America Chavez punched a giant floating head in space. I mean,
Monica blew up some stuff. Yeah, but
right.
by the nature of superhero comics, so that is intrinsic in the storytelling nature of it. The fact that those fights were cool to see and visually watch are nice, but they're irrelevant to the greater mission almost.
Right, and what's great is that Alan Ewing and Kenneth Rockefeller, what they've done is they spent most of this issue. Well, what the script is doing is basically setting you up for, it's going to be another Avengers book where they punch cosmic things, and that's going to be how it solves. But they start with Blue Marvel. Very good choice because Blue Marvel's talking about, here's a science problem. And we end with a science problem. So the issue doesn't intentionally mislead you, but it does kind of use your expectations against you. And again, from Rokerford's viewpoint, all of the fights are visually interesting, but he saved the 2-page huge spread for a talk, a conversation, which tells you kind of the mission statement of this book is the super huge big stuff is not going to be the fights necessarily. It's going to be something else.
Since we're at the end of the first issue and you've not read them before, what do you think? Like, if you had to rate it right now, what's your thought?
I've really enjoyed it. Like, I've not been a huge fan of modern Avengers stuff. There's been a couple exceptions, like the first run of New Avengers I really enjoyed. There's been a little bit off and on bits and pieces of Avengers in the past 10 years that I've picked up, but nothing's really grabbed me. And this, when I first started reading this, I was like, I don't know why this is an Avengers book. But by the end of the issue, I realized, this is, for lack of a better term, the Avengers science team, right? This is the Avengers who go off and solve weird cosmic shit. And the only real connectivity to the Avengers is Carol and T'Challa. But even then, they're acting in different roles. Yes, Carol's there obviously as the powerhouse, but her very first appearance as a pilot. T'Challa's main contribution is money and clout to this team right now. So it's while these are traditional Avengers characters, they're acting, at least currently, in atypical roles that they're still capable of, but we don't usually see a lot of.
Additionally, I will say, though, that Blue Marvel was a member of the Avengers, and Spectrum, as their current name, has led the Avengers team and was an Avenger starting, I want to say, in the 80s.
I say Avengers here, I'm talking shorthand for the Avengers as of the past 10-ish years.
They've both been on different versions of the team.
Okay,
like,
well, which reinforces I'm not that familiar with the Avengers.
So, like, your love of the Fantastic Four and like your
Yeah.
insider knowledge, I am that with the Avengers. I don't know
Okay.
why I loved them when they were like a C scrub team. Like, you shouldn't be able to do anything. Captain America, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver and Hawkeye. You should not be battling anybody.
To be fair, that is actually my favorite one of the Avengers, when it's like the Cap and 3 supervillains are trying to pretend like they know what the fuck they're doing. It's actually a really fun run.
Or we could jump to like the Black Knight, Wasp, Cersei, and Gilgamesh. We have some heavy hitters, but you got Black Knight with you. You're not doing anything of note. So I have a deep love of the Avengers that ranges all there. So I know like the different variants of the teams mostly and stuff like that. So it's
fair enough. Then I mean, it sounds like it's more of an Avengers team than I had first given for. But still, this to me has the shit I love about Fantastic Four, right? It's weird science stuff, and that we're going to try to talk to people. It has that, we've talked about some Doctor Who. The thing I love about Doctor Who is like, talking to your enemies and finding a solution. It's a superhero comic. There's going to be fights. I'm not going to be mad at it for doing what it's supposed to do, but I like that in each case, each fight was doing something else. It was pushing narrative forward, whether it was pushing Monica's relationship with America as a context for her own struggles with humanity, or Carol and Adam trying to understand how they both fit in modern society because they're both outcasts in very different ways.
Yeah.
Shows that, again, this is 22 pages.
Yeah.
And
it's shorter than the Armor Wars comics by, I want to say, 6 or 7 pages.
Yeah. And I mean, of these characters, I know Monica primarily from the 80s. I'm pretty up to date with T'Challa, but the other, I knew very little about Blue Marvel. I read a little bit of the stuff you recommended before this, and the other 2 characters I know just from context. Like, I know a little bit about Carol, a little bit about America. That's it. And I felt like I got to know them, and also where Monica and T'Challa are at now from this one issue. So for issue 1, that's what you wanted issue 1 to do. This absolutely slaps, and I'm now actively pissed that there's only like 12 issues of this fucking comic.
Yeah. Totally upset. Awesome. So, Eddie, are we going to do a different comic next time? We're going to leave the Ultimates and maybe go do like...
We're going to Fantastic Four now. No, we're going to do issue 2, which is the exact same team. Find the same places you found this, or turn the page if you're like me and you have the trade issue.
Awesome. If people are looking to buy your swag and do all that cool stuff, where can they do it at?
Pugsteady.com, Darker Hue Discord, yada yada yada. We're like 120 episodes into this. You know where we're at by now.
We can't stop this bit because, as Stan Lee would say, if this could be someone's first comic or their first Genreless podcast, because Stan Lee knew that we were going to do the Genreless podcast, where Stan Lee approved, but we love Jack Kirby.
Oh god, Jack Kirby!
I said it. Hot take.
No, it's not with me. It ain't. Not with me. It ain't.
Much like Eddie, if you want my stuff, Darker Hue website, Darker Discord. I want next issue.
All right, do it. See you next week for issue 2.